The valley looked like it had been painted for a brochure. Bright winter sun, hard blue shadows, a frozen creek bed threading through clean snow like a silver scar. From a distance, it promised quiet. Up close, it promised nothing. The wind ran down the slopes in cold sheets, lifting spindrift into the air so the world shimmered and blurred at the edges. The pines were thin and scattered, their branches bent under frost. There was no real cover, only places you could die a second slower. They were in the funnel when the first burst hit. It chewed the snow at ankle height, a line of violent punctuation across the creek bed. The sound didn't roll like it did in warmer air, it snapped. Every shot had a hard slap to it, amplified by the open whiteness. The assault element dropped as one, trained bodies reacting before minds finished processing. Boots skated on packed snow, knees slammed into ice. Hands clawed for purchase on the shallow depression the terrain offered them. It wasn't a trench. It was barely a fold. It was the kind of cover that felt like a joke while rounds punched through the crust and threw icy grit into faces. A machine gun up on the northern ridgeline found its rhythm, hammering in steady, disciplined bursts that walked across the depression like a broom sweeping a floor. From the East Rock Shelf, rifle fire stitched in, angled to cut off any attempt to retreat along the creek. It wasn't random shooting. It was geometry, overlapping arcs designed to pin and punish. The radio in the team leader's hand crackled with overlapping voices, half-sentences colliding. Contact front, North Ridge. Taking, then, as if someone had thrown a blanket over the entire sky, the net dissolved into raw static. A thick, grinding hiss swallowed every word. Jamming, strong, deliberate, tuned exactly to their bands. The team leader slapped the handset, switched channels, tried again. The hiss stayed. Wind pushed powder into optics, frosting lenses, and making the world swim. Hand signals replaced comms in an instant. The leader's gloved hand snapped out. Smoke shift hold. Two operators reached for their canisters. The next mortar round landed just beyond the depression before the pins could even be pulled. The blast didn't just throw snow. It punched the air. The concussion hit ribs and teeth, a hammer blow that left everyone breathing through clenched jaws. Snow rained down in clumps, heavy enough to sting through fabric. The second round came closer. The third closer still. They weren't ranging by guesswork. Someone was watching. Someone had pre-measured this valley like a firing range. A scout tried to move one of the wounded, an operator whose sleeve had been torn open, blood soaking into white until it looked unreal, like paint spilled on fresh canvas. The scout's boots dug for traction as he dragged, and a shot caught him in the leg. He went down hard, mouth open in a soundless shout that got swallowed by the next explosion. The medic crawled to him immediately, body pressed low to the snow, moving only when bursts and blasts covered the sound. His hands were already red, fingers working fast, tourniquet pressure clamped, doing violence to flesh to keep life inside it. Every time his hands slipped, he steadied them with a breath that steamed and vanished. Someone whispered ammo counts. Not shouted, whispered, like the numbers were sacred and fragile. 2 mags. 3 left. Half. The team leader's eyes flicked up at the ridgeline. The machine gun shifted just a few degrees. If it settled there, it would collapse the last safe angle the depression offered, turning their shallow fold into a coffin. Smoke! The leader barked anyway, more at the universe than his people. Am I? A calm voice tried to cut through on a narrow band backup channel. Thin, disciplined, almost bored against the chaos. It wasn't loud. It didn't compete. It simply existed. I have a line. The answer from command came back in chopped fragments, as if forced through a clogged pipe. Then it sharpened into a clear directive that felt absurd against the reality exploding around them. Negative. Stand down. The order hung in the air, useless and heavy. In the depression, breath came in short bursts. The metallic taste of adrenaline-coated tongues. Snow glare-burned eyes. Every shot slapped the world. Every mortar thumped like an angry god stamping its feet. The calm voice didn't argue. It didn't plead. It simply went silent. Another mortar round landed close enough to throw snow into their mouths. Another came in, bracketing tighter. And then, almost lost under the hiss of wind and drifting powder, a single suppressed crack snapped from somewhere high and unseen. It wasn't the thunder of the machine gun or the sharp chatter of rifles. It was a small, contained sound like someone breaking a dry stick. On the ridgeline, a figure who had been moving with purpose froze mid-motion. His arm was raised as if drawing an invisible line in the air, correcting something. Then he folded into the snow, collapsing as if the ground had opened beneath him. The next mortar never came. For a heartbeat, the valley seemed to inhale and hold. The pressure eased in a way no one in the depression understood. The machine gun hesitated, its rhythm breaking, its barrel pausing between bursts like a hand unsure of where to point. The team leader looked at the medic. The medic looked back with blood on his gloves and confusion in his eyes. No one spoke, because speaking felt like it might summon the mortars again. On the radio, command, still blind behind the jamming, repeated the order as if words could shape the world into compliance. Stand down. The team didn't know who had fired the shot. They didn't know from where. They didn't know what had been seen from above that they couldn't see from the valley floor. They only knew that the mortars had stopped, and in a fight like this, that pause could mean the difference between dying pinned in snow and crawling out alive. Hours earlier, the same valley had been nothing but a line on a laminated map inside a cramped forward hut. The morning had been bright enough to hurt. Winter sunlight poured in through the doorway and turned the snow outside into a sheet of glare. The hut smelled like fuel, sweat, and stale coffee. The team gathered around the table. The assault element, 2 scouts, a medic, and a small technical pair, quiet civilians in cold weather gear carrying cases that looked too delicate to belong out here. Their job was to confirm the status of a remote sensor relay site, a listening node tucked into the mountains. It had gone dark overnight. No signal, no heartbeat. The kind of silence that wasn't always accidental. If that relay is compromised, the tech lead had said, tapping the map with a gloved finger, they can mask movement through the corridor. We lose early warning. We lose response timing. The assault element's leader, Sergeant Callan, nodded once. He was compact, hard-eyed, built like a man who had learned long ago that hesitation was expensive. We go fast, he said. We confirm. We pull out before weather closes. At the edge of the group stood the Overwatch specialist, attached for the mission. She didn't take up space. She didn't push herself into the center. She listened like listening was a form of aiming. Her name was Mara Voss. She was the kind of person people described as quiet, not because she lacked presence, but because she didn't waste sound. She watched more than she spoke. She checked wind and light more than she checked the mood of the room. And when she did speak, it was usually something practical, something that didn't care if anyone liked it. Someone in the assault element, older, confident, not cruel, but dismissive, glanced at her rifle case and smirked. We're moving quick, he said. No time for a long glass. A few chuckles, not malicious, the kind of laughter that comes from familiarity and ego. Men who had moved through fire together enough times to think their way was the only way. Mara didn't react. She simply reached forward, pointed to the route line on the map. This creek line, she said. It's a funnel. Sparse trees. Minimal cover. And there's a saddle here. Comms drop out. She tapped the contour lines where the valley pinched. Dead zone. If we lose our net there, we're blind to support. Sergeant Callan looked at the saddle, then at the comms tech. The comms tech shrugged. We've had dropouts all over, he said. Terrain's a mess. Mara's eyes stayed on the map. Not like this, she said. This is consistent. Predictable. The senior voice, call him Major Hawthorne, the liaison officer who approved routes and worried about higher consequences, shook his head. We have a window, he said. Daylight extraction is tight. We're not changing the plan for ghosts on a map. Mara inhaled slowly, then let it out. I want a higher vantage insertion, she said. Put me on the east shelf before the main element enters the valley. I can cover the approach. If something's waiting, I'll see it before it's on top of you. Hawthorne's expression didn't change, but his tone sharpened. No, he said. Too much time. Too much risk. We moved together. The decision felt final in a way that told Mara arguing would only harden it. She nodded once and stepped back, turning her focus to what she could control. Constraints stacked quietly as she prepared. Limited daylight. Gusting winds forecast by afternoon that could degrade optics and push spindrift into glass. One spare battery for her rangefinder. A cold that would punish bare skin in seconds. She checked her bolt rifle, ran cloth along metal that had to be clean and dry. She counted magazines. She taped hand warmers near the optic housing to fight lens fog. She packed minimal water and tools, refusing weight that didn't earn its place. She moved with the calm of someone who had learned that panic could be kept out of the body by giving the hands work. Inside her map sleeve, she kept a folded document. Official. Crisp once, now creased and softened by being carried too long. A qualification certificate, a commendation, proof that she belonged here in ways people never cared to read. She didn't show it because it never changed the look in their eyes. It only made the dismissal quieter. A brief intel note lay on the table, barely discussed. A local cell in the region had been trained by outsiders, disciplined, coordinated, capable of jamming and indirect fire. That line should have mattered more than it did. But in rooms like this, people believed what their confidence told them. They stepped off in daylight. Snow crunched under boots in a rhythm that felt almost peaceful. The valley ahead looked calm, deceptively so, like a postcard with teeth. On the march, Mara kept her gaze moving. She watched the tree lean. She watched the ridges. She watched for the kind of small changes that meant human intention. Near the creek, she saw fresh parallel tracks, too straight, too even. Not animal, not wind. She paused for half a second, angled her head, followed the lines with her eyes until they disappeared behind a drift. They were a story written in snow. Tracks, she said quietly to Sergeant Callan when he came alongside. He glanced. Could be locals, he said. Could be anyone. Could be staged, Mara answered. Callan didn't argue. He didn't dismiss her either. He simply nodded once, the way a man nods when he registers a piece of data but doesn't yet know what to do with it. As they approached the saddle, Mara felt something in the air change. Nothing mystical, just an accumulation of small cues. The way sound seemed to flatten, the way the wind shifted, the way the valley's shape began to feel like a hand closing. Then birds lifted from the east shelf, too synchronized to be random. And the first burst ripped the snow at ankle height. The ambush sprang like a trap that had been oiled and tested. The enemy geometry revealed itself quickly. Machine gun on the north ridge, rifleman tucked in a tree-lean pocket, an elevated observer feeding corrections. The mortars began bracketing as if the enemy had rehearsed the depression itself. Jamming swallowed their comms right where Mara had warned it would. The backup channel sputtered in broken shards that couldn't carry coordination. They dove into the shallow fold. Snow cover was thin and deceptive. Rounds punched through, spraying icy grit into faces. Someone yelled for smoke. Someone else yelled that smoke would mark them for the mortars. The medic went to work, hands already red. A drone buzzed over the ridge line, small, quick, not armed. It wasn't there to kill. It was there to confirm, to record, to guide. Mara tried to lift her optic above the valley lip. The ridge line and shelf blocked her view. She could see pieces, but not the whole. She could identify muzzle flashes, but not the spotter's hand. She needed elevation, not courage. Elevation. Sergeant Callan tried for comms again. Nothing but hiss. He signaled for a break contact, but the machine gun shifted and the mortars walked tighter, shaping their movement like a shepherd shaping sheep. Ammo began to disappear. Suppressive fire drained magazines. Cold made hands clumsy. Reloads took longer. Barrels heated even in the frozen air. A scout got hit moving a casualty. The medic crawled farther, body pressed low. The wounded operator's blood spread into snow like a stain that refused to freeze. Mara heard the calm voice in her own headset as she tried to push on a narrowband backup channel she kept for emergencies. It was her voice. Controlled. Practical. I have a line on the mortar correction. I can. Command's answer came back, clipped and firm, born of caution and distance and someone's idea of protocol. Negative. Stand down. The order felt surreal in the depression. Mortars were walking in. The drone was overhead. The machine gun was shifting. There was no standing down. There was only dying or doing something. Sergeant Callan's eyes met hers for a brief second. In that look was a whole conversation. Trust, doubt, desperation, the weight of responsibility. He couldn't gamble the whole element on a move he hadn't approved. He also couldn't stop her if she decided to become her own mission. Mara didn't ask again. She didn't argue with command. She didn't make a speech. She made a decision. If she couldn't be authorized, she could still be effective. She slipped her pack off, quickly, quietly. Cached what she didn't need. Extra weight that would slow her, make noise, betray her. She kept only what mattered. Rifle, 2 spare mags, minimal water, a small cutting tool, a single battery for the rangefinder. She secured her optic, checked the bolt, checked the chamber. 1 breath. In, out. Then she moved. The frozen drainage ditch was her first cover. It ran away from the depression at a slight angle, a shallow cut that kept her below the ridge's direct line of sight. She crawled through it like a shadow, timing movement with enemy bursts. When the machine gun hammered, she advanced. When it paused, she froze. Silence became camouflage. The drone drifted overhead, faint buzz against wind. Mara flattened herself into the ditch, becoming another lump of snow and fabric. She let the drone pass, waited until it climbed and turned. She moved again. The boulder field was next, dark stones half buried in snow, creating pockets of cover and angles. She slipped between them, careful not to dislodge loose crust that would avalanche down and announce her. The wind gusted, threatening balance, pushing spindrift into her face. Visibility flickered. Light flashed off the snow and made the world too bright. Then the climb. The east shelf rose steeply, a slope of crusted snow over rock. It looked solid until it wasn't. Halfway up, the crust broke under her weight. Her body slid, sudden and fast, the world tilting. Instinct snapped her elbows down, digging into the snow, arresting her slide inches before she would have spilled into open ground. One glove tore away, snagged on crust. Bare fingers hit air that felt like knives. Pain flared, then dulled as numbness set in. She flexed her fingers, forcing blood to move. She didn't have time to mourn the glove. As she climbed higher, she saw proof that this ambush had been built, not discovered. Shallow snow pits, edges trampled and packed, positions carved out days earlier. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. Someone had studied movement patterns, terrain, timing. Someone wanted them here. That thought tightened something in her chest. Not fear, clarity. The notch she reached near the shelf was narrow, overlooked, and perfect, a slit between rocks that opened into a lateral view of the ridgeline positions. From the valley floor, the mortar team had been hidden by angle. From here, they were exposed. A small group, crouched near gear, a caller standing in the open just enough to guide death with his hands. Nearby, hunched against the wind, was a figure over equipment, antenna, battery, a small box that looked out of place in snow. The jammer. The reason comms had died like a throat cut. Mara settled into the notch, body pressed against rock. She built a rest with her pack, checked her optic, controlled her breath. The battlefield roared below, but up here, in this slit of stone, the sound felt distant, like thunder heard from inside a house. Her fingers were numb. Her optic was beginning to haze, fog creeping along the edges as temperature shifted. She warmed it with the heel of her hand, careful, quick. She taped another hand warmer near the glass. It wouldn't be perfect. It would be enough. She touched the folded document inside her map sleeve once. Through fabric, through layers, felt its edges. The paper didn't make her braver. It reminded her she had something to prove that should never have needed proving. Below, mortars bracketed tighter. The depression trembled with each impact. The machine gun shifted again, threatening to sweep their last safe angle. Mara built a target ladder the way she had been trained, not in numbers and jargon for the sake of it, but in logic. Force multipliers first, the pieces that made everything else possible. the jammer operator, the mortar caller, the RPG team. She could see farther down the ridge line, dragging a tube into position. The spotter, elevated, scanning, feeding corrections. Then the machine gun crew. She watched the mortar caller's rhythm. Gesture, glance, correction, gesture, glance, correction. Each motion brought another round closer to the depression. She didn't rush. She waited for the hinge, the moment where dropping him would do more than kill a man. It would break a system. That moment came when he raised his arm and leaned forward, mouth open as if speaking into a radio. Mara exhaled slowly, held the pause, and squeezed. The suppressed crack was small against the world's violence, but the effect was enormous. The mortar caller froze mid-gesture and folded into the drift, his arm dropping like a broken branch. The next mortar never came. Mara didn't watch him fall for long. She shifted immediately, optics swinging to the jammer operator. He was hunched, adjusting something, maybe changing frequencies, maybe increasing power. His posture was the posture of someone confident he was safe behind distance and geometry. Mara exhaled again, squeezed again. The second shot hit him hard enough to collapse him into his equipment. The antenna wobbled, then fell. The hiss in Mara's ear changed, still there, but thinner, as if someone had torn fabric. Down below, Sergeant Callan's radio sputtered. Callan, copy. Broken, fragmented, but alive. Mara's eyes flicked to the RPG team. They were shifting now, reacting to the sudden silence of the mortars and the wobble of the jammer. Confusion moved through them like wind through grass. One of them looked up, scanning the shelf line. Another lifted the tube, trying to reposition for a closer shot into the depression. Mara didn't give them time. She chose the one carrying the tube, not because she liked killing, because removing the weapon was faster than hoping the men would choose mercy. The third shot dropped him, the RPG clattering into snow. Below, Sergeant Callan felt the shift even if he didn't understand its source. The mortars had stopped. The machine gun's rhythm was broken. Comms were sputtering back. He didn't waste the gift. He signaled, smoke now, movement now. Suppressive fire angled toward the ridge machine gun. The unit began to inch the wounded into a better line, dragging them through snow that turned pink under their bodies. On the ridge, the enemy adapted. A counter-sniper began probing Mara's shelf line, sending shots into likely hide points. The round snapped close, chipping rock, spraying dust and ice. Mara didn't flinch. She moved by inches, micro shifts that changed the angle of her head, the line of her barrel, the pattern of what the enemy could predict. She kept her silhouette inside the notch, refused to offer the sky a clean shape. Two climbers moved along the rock seen below her position, lean men in white camouflage, using crampons and hands to find purchase. They weren't rushing. They were hunting with patience. The drone reappeared, lower this time, slower, searching for muzzle flash and movement. Mara's optic fog worsened. She wiped it quickly, warmed it with her palm, cursed silently as the haze threatened clarity. Her bare fingers were stiff. She could feel the cold in the bones now, deep and stubborn. Ammo count mattered. No waste shots. The enemy tried heavier pressure. A crew-serve gun shifted to rake the shelf, rounds slamming into snow and rock near her notch, turning powder into stinging shrapnel. The notch that had been perfect began to feel like a trap of its own. Mara scanned for the center of enemy coordination, the one making the adaptation happen. A man elevated near a rock outcrop, not on the gun, not on the mortar, but moving like a conductor, gesturing, pointing, turning heads, shifting teams. The on-scene commander or spotter, the one holding cohesion together. Taking him would be risk. He was not as exposed as the others had been. The shot would require a brief angle that would reveal her position. Down below, the smoke was blooming. The unit was starting to move. But if the enemy regained rhythm, if the machine guns settled and the mortars resumed, those men would die in the open. Mara made a choice that felt like stepping on a thin ice. She inched forward just enough to bring the spotter into a clean line. The counter-sniper's rounds snapped again, closer. The drone's buzz drifted toward her notch. Mara ignored it all. She focused on breath, on the sight picture, On the squeeze. The shot went. The spotter jerked, then collapsed behind the rock, his gestures ending midair. Unlike a cut wire, enemy cohesion frayed. The machine gun paused, uncertain. Rifle fire became less synchronized, more individual. The climbers hesitated, glancing back as if waiting for direction that didn't come. The counter-sniper fired again, but his pattern broke. Below, Sergeant Callan seized the opening. He pushed the element toward the creek bend, the only route that offered a break in lines of fire. Operators bounded in pairs, one moving while the other covered. The medic and another man dragged the wounded, muscles burning, breath coming in harsh clouds. A scout limped, supported by a shoulder. Mara covered them with disciplined shots, only when it mattered. She didn't shoot at every moving shape. She shot at the ones that threatened to restore control. A rifleman trying to get to the machine gun, a runner reaching for the jammer, a man lifting binoculars to refine the depression. Each squeeze was a decision. The climbers resumed, now closer, moving with purpose again, anger sharpening their caution. The drone dipped, trying to peek into the notch. A shot chipped the rock above Mara's head, dust sprinkling into her hair. Time to leave. Mara pulled back from the notch, shifting her rifle to her shoulder, moving low along the shelf line. The descent was worse than the climb. Gravity wanted to throw her into the open. Her numb fingers wanted to betray her grip. The wind gusted, pushing spindrift into her face, blinding her for half-seconds that felt like hours. She moved fast but quiet, choosing silence over speed whenever the drone's buzz came near. Once she slipped boot skidding on ice. Her heart slammed. She arrested herself with a forearm, pain shooting up her elbow. She stayed still, listening. The drone hovered, then drifted away, fooled by her lack of motion. Behind her, shots snapped and echoed. The counter-sniper tried to reacquire. The climbers kept coming. The crew-serve gun raked the shelf, snow exploding around her path. Mara reached the drainage ditch and slid into it, low and breathless. She crawled, using the ditch like a tunnel, moving only when bursts and wind covered her sound. Her bare fingers burned with cold. She flexed them, felt nothing. She forced them to close around the rifle anyway. Ahead, through the spindrift, she saw the smoke cloud near the creek bend. She saw movement, friendly silhouettes, bounding toward the extraction corridor. She heard a new sound, faint at first, then growing. Rotors. Hope sounded like a distant drum, a rhythm you could feel in your chest before you could clearly hear it. The extraction corridor wasn't a place so much as a stretch of terrain that offered slightly less exposure. They reached it as the daylight began to angle, shadows lengthening. The helicopter or the vehicle stage beyond were still minutes out, but the sound meant someone had eyes on them now. It meant the world outside the kill zone had finally noticed they were bleeding. Sergeant Callan counted heads, hands moving in fast signals. "Move! Move!" he shouted, voice raw. They piled behind a small ridge, using it as the last scrap of cover. The medic was still working, hands shaking now that adrenaline had room to show itself. The wounded operator whose sleeve had been torn was alive, pale, eyes unfocused but breathing. Mara slid in behind them, blending into the group like she'd never left. Her face was pale, her fingers gray-blue, her rifle dusted with snow. She didn't announce what she had done. She didn't demand recognition. She simply checked angles, watched the ridge line, waited to see if the enemy would follow. The enemy didn't rush in. They had been shaping, controlling, waiting. Now, with cohesion broken and time slipping away, they pulled back into the ridges like shadows withdrawing from light. The drone buzzed once more, farther away, then vanished beyond the shelf. The extraction came hard and fast. Rotor wash kicked up snow, turning the air into a white storm. Men loaded wounded first, then equipment, then bodies. The helicopter's open door was a rectangle of darkness against glare. Sergeant Callan shoved a hand toward Mara. "Go," he barked. Mara climbed in, boots slipping on the skid, and grabbed the door frame with numb fingers that barely obeyed. As they lifted, the valley fell away beneath them, white beautiful, indifferent. From above, It looked harmless again, as if it hadn't tried to swallow them. Back at the forward sight, heat hit like a punch. Men stripped gloves, stared at their hands as blood returned with painful tingling. Someone vomited from shock and exhaustion. The medic sat on a bench, elbows on knees, staring at nothing while his hands trembled. In the debrief tent, the atmosphere was different, quieter, not because people were calm, but because they were processing how close they had come to disappearing. Major Hawthorne stood at the front with a tablet and a look that tried to pretend the day had gone according to plan. His voice was controlled. "We encountered coordinated enemy contact," he began. "Comms interference." Sergeant Callan's stare could have cut steel. "We got funneled into a kill box," he said flatly. "They knew our route. They had pre-ranged fires. They had a jammer positioned exactly at the saddle. And they had a drone." Hawthorne's jaw tightened. "We're still assessing how they—" The tech lead interrupted, pale and furious. "The relay site," he said, "wasn't just dark. It was compromised. Someone accessed the housing. The encryption module was almost gone." The tent went still. That was the motive. The reason the enemy had been patient, the reason they hadn't rushed to finish them in the depression. They wanted control. They wanted time. They wanted that module. And they wanted something else too, something uglier. "A propaganda win," Callan said quietly, as if tasting the words. "Record an elite unit pinned and cut down in daylight. Proof they own the corridor." Hawthorne's eyes flicked away for a fraction of a second. "We have no confirmation they intended." "We saw the drone," Callan snapped. "It wasn't there for fun." Hawthorne's shoulders stiffened. "We did not authorize any independent action," he said, tone sharpening. "Any unapproved shot risked." Mara stood near the back, silent, hands wrapped around a cup of something hot she didn't feel. Her fingers were bandaged now, skin red and raw. Hawthorne's gaze found her. "You attempted to transmit," he said. "You were instructed to stand down." The room's tension tightened like wire. A few operators shifted, eyes flicking between Mara and Hawthorne, between protocol and survival. Sergeant Callan took a slow breath. "Sir," he said, voice controlled, "if she had stood down, we'd be having this debrief over body bags." Hawthorne's expression tightened. "You don't know that." Callan leaned forward slightly. "I do," he said, "because I heard the mortars stop. I heard comms sputter back. I saw the enemy lose rhythm. That didn't happen by accident. The comms tech had been working with recorded snippets from their equipment, trying to pull signal out of noise." He tapped the tablet. "We have partial audio," he said. "The jam shifts at a specific timestamp." He played it. The tent filled with the hiss of interference. Then, faint, thin, words began to break through. The moment aligned with the mortar silence. The timestamp aligned with the first suppressed shot. No one spoke for a few seconds after the playback ended. Hawthorne swallowed. "Our concern," he said, softer now, "was that an unauthorized shot would reveal your position and escalate the engagement." Mara's voice was quiet when she finally spoke. "It was already escalated," she said. The simplicity of it landed harder than shouting would have. Hawthorne looked like he wanted to argue, but the room's collective gaze made it difficult to pretend protocol mattered more than breathing. The tech lead cleared his throat. "They were prepared," he said. "Pre-dug pits, pre-ranged mortar points, jamming position for that saddle. Someone studied patterns." Callan nodded slowly. "They knew our route and timing," he said. "Which means either we got predictable or they had eyes on us longer than we like." Eyes turned toward Hawthorne again, unspoken accusation hanging in the air. Not necessarily betrayal, but negligence, overconfidence, the kind that gets people killed. Hawthorne's voice tightened. "We'll investigate," he said. "For now, we're focusing on recovery." Mara felt the folded document against her side, inside the map sleeve. She hadn't planned to reveal it. She had carried it for herself more than anyone else. But the day had pulled truths out of hiding. She stepped forward, pulled the map sleeve from her kit, and unfolded the paper slowly. The creases open like old wounds. It was a qualification certificate and a commendation, proof of her training and a prior action where she had saved a team with the same kind of calm decision. It had been quietly buried after a political dispute, after the wrong person took offense at the idea of her belonging in rooms like this. She had stopped showing it because paper never changed perception. Only outcomes did. She held it out, not like a weapon, but like a mirror. Hawthorne's eyes flicked over it. His expression shifted from irritation to something closer to discomfort. "This was not in your file," he said. "It was," Mara answered. "It got misplaced." Callan's gaze stayed on Mara, not the paper. He didn't look shocked. He looked like a man fitting pieces together that should have been obvious. "That's why you don't talk much," he said quietly. Not a question, a realization. Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Hawthorne cleared his throat, posture stiff. "Regardless," he said, "protocol exists for a reason." Callan's voice stayed even. "So does competence," he said. "And today, competence kept us alive." The room didn't erupt into applause. It wasn't that kind of place. Respect here didn't arrive with speeches. It arrived with small gestures, with who got listened to next time. Callan took Mara's map sleeve gently, set it on the table in the center, and placed a finger on the valley route line. "Next time," he said, looking around the tent, "we don't walk into funnels without eyes above. Next time, when someone tells us about tracks and dead zones, we don't laugh." He pulled out a chair at the table, the place usually reserved for voices people considered essential, and nudged it toward Mara. "Sit," he said. Mara hesitated for half a second, then sat. The chair creaked under her weight like any other chair. But the sound felt symbolic, as if the room itself was adjusting. Hawthorne looked away, jaw tight. He hadn't apologized. He probably wouldn't. But the room no longer treated his caution as absolute truth. After the debrief, the camp quieted. Wounded were moved to medical. Gears cleaned. Men sat in corners staring at walls, letting their bodies shake now that danger had passed. Mara sat alone for a while, hands wrapped around warmth. Her fingers throbbed as sensation returned, pain blooming with life. She unwrapped the bandage just enough to check skin, then wrapped it again. She didn't complain. She simply acknowledged what her body had paid. Later, she cleaned her rifle. It was ritual almost sacred. Cloth along metal. Oil where needed. Bolt checked. Chamber checked. Each motion was calm, precise, a way of keeping the mind from replaying images too sharply. But the images came anyway. The mortar caller's arm raised mid-gesture. The moment his body folded. The way the valley held its breath when mortars stopped. The spotter collapsing behind rock. The climbers' faces as they realized the hunt had turned. Precision had weight. Even when it saved lives, it left an imprint. The people who thought sniping was cold didn't understand that cold was easier than caring. Caring made the trigger heavier. Caring made you count breath and consequences, not just distance. A knock came on the tent pole. Mara looked up. Sergeant Callan stood there, helmet off, hair damp with sweat. His face looked older than it had in the morning, lines deepened by the day's near loss. He stepped inside without asking, because in places like this, asking wasn't always necessary. He held out a glove, her glove. Someone had found it, torn but intact. "Thought you might want this," he said. Mara took it. Her fingers brushed the fabric, feeling the tear, the missing warmth. "Thanks," she said. Callan nodded once, then hesitated as if trying to find words that didn't feel like a speech. "When you went," he said, "I didn't know if you'd make it back." Mara kept cleaning, gaze on metal. "Neither did I," she said. Callan let out a breath. "I should have backed you earlier," he said. "I heard you about the saddle. About the tracks." Mara finally looked up. "You registered it," she said. "That's more than most." Callan's jaw tightened. "Doesn't feel like enough." "It was enough," Mara said quietly, "because you didn't stop me." Callan's eyes searched hers for a moment, then dropped to the rifle. "How'd you know," he asked, "that would work? One shot like that. Mortars just stop." Mara paused, cloth in hand. "I didn't know," she said. "I read the rhythm. The way he corrected. He was the hinge. Without him, they lose timing. Without timing, mortars become guesswork. And guesswork is slower than fear." Callan nodded slowly, absorbing it. "And the jammer?" "Force multipliers," Mara said. "If you remove the thing that makes them coordinated, they become individuals. Individuals make mistakes." Callan's mouth twitched, Not quite a smile, but something close. You make it sound simple. It's not, Mara said. It's just clear when you're alone. Callan looked away, as if that last part hit him somewhere private. Then he turned back. They wanted that module, he said. They almost got it. Mara's fingers tightened around the glove. They still might try, she said. Callan nodded. We'll be ready. He started to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, he said, voice low, you rewrote how some people in this unit see things today. Mara watched him. I didn't do it for that, she said. I know, Callan answered. That's why it matters. He left. Mara sat alone again, rifle clean, glove in hand, the folded document tucked back into her sleeve. Paper still didn't change the world on its own. But today, the world had changed anyway. Outside, the sun was still up, bright and cold. Snow glittered like broken glass. From a distance, the mountains looked peaceful again, as if the valley hadn't tried to swallow men whole. Mara stepped outside and inhaled air so cold it burned her lungs. The wind carried the faint smell of fuel, the distant thrum of machinery, the quiet sounds of a camp pretending it could return to normal. She looked toward the ridge line in the distance, the place where a man's raised arm had been turned into silence. She didn't feel triumph. She felt the strange, heavy calm of survival, the knowledge that doing the right thing didn't always feel good, but it felt necessary. Somewhere behind her, laughter started, soft, tired, shaky, the kind that came when adrenaline finally loosened its grip. It didn't last long. It didn't need to. Mara slid her hand into the torn glove and flexed her fingers. Pain flared, then settled. She accepted it, a cost paid to keep others breathing. History didn't always change with noise. It didn't always change with medals or speeches or official reports that sanitized the truth. Sometimes it changed in a white valley under daylight, when a voice was told to stand down, and the voice chose instead to do the work. One calm breath, one clean squeeze, in a battlefield that held its breath long enough for people to live.